Hey entrepreneurs and website owners, if you're ready to take your online presence to the next level, you need a reliable web host, and that's where HostGator comes in. HostGator is your one-stop solution for easy, affordable, and powerful web hosting. Whether you're launching a blog, an online store, or anything in between, HostGator's got you covered. Don't miss out on creating the website you've always wanted. Visit MilwaukeeMafia.com/HostGator today and let your online journey begin.
You're listening to Milwaukee Mafia, your podcast dose of Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. I'm Eric.
I'm Gavin.
Gavin, the third time's a charm again, huh?
I guess.
So what are we talking about today?
Okay, so we are now in 1967 on our timeline.
Woohoo!
Yes, woohoo. we are moving forward. This one, for the lack of a better title, I'm calling it The End of Loan Shark Harry Kaminisky.
Okay, and I think we talked about this a little bit last time.
We may have mentioned it.
I don't think that we haven't talked about Harry Kaminisky in a while, so
right.
Are you going to go into the whole spiel of who he was again?
I don't know about a whole spiel, but I will catch people up a little. Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be a great place to start, at least.
Okay, so Harry was born December 13th, 1908 in Appleton, Wisconsin.
All right.
Yes. He was a lawyer by training, but he found himself drawn to finance and insurance. He attended Lawrence University and Marquette, got his start with his brother in the used car business, and then from the used car business figured out like the money in the used car business wasn't the used cars, it was the loans in the car business. So he went up from there. He also had a tendency to invest in all kinds of random things. We'll see some of that in today's episode. The last time he probably came up on this podcast is because he had invested in the Black Knight bar, nightclub, whatever.
Okay.
Which was a gay bar.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know that he really cares what he invests in, because you'll see, like, he's got money in all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of got a reputation of a loan shark, meaning that you can get a loan from him, but his rates aren't very good.
Like beyond loan sharking type rates?
Yeah, it's not. He's gotten away with it for some time, but now it's going to start catching up with him. So I got some notes. I'm going to try to get through them fairly quickly. They're pretty thorough. Like, putting this together, let me tell you. I try to make these notes as simple as I can, and I don't always succeed, because going through, like, they're interviewing tons of people, they're going through financial records, and it really gets bogged down. And I don't want that on the podcast. I don't want people, because it'll be like, oh, they got a loan based off of this car, so then they go and they do the FBI does a background on the car, and it's like, okay, does he really own this car? Does it, and it's really super thorough, but it's not really all that interesting.
So is he giving them the loan based on the car, are you saying? Or is he getting a loan on a car he supposedly owns that they're researching to figure out if it's...
That is a great question, and you're about to find out.
Okay.
Because, yes.
Both? Okay.
Okay, so we're going to arbitrarily start this in 1959. There's this guy named Emil Lusinger, and he's the president of an excavating and plumbing company. He meets Harry Kaminisky, and Harry says, hey, I've just bought all this land in Menominee Falls. I would really like it if you came in and like excavated it and added like plumbing and all those fine things, so I can sell the subdivision for lots. So the excavator comes in, puts in $40,000 worth of sewer water construction. The following year, Harry contacts him again, says, hey, I've bought more land in Menominee Falls. Can you do this again? The excavator sends Harry a bill for $169,000.
Because he never paid him for the first one he did?
Yeah. Harry then says, here's what I'm going to do. Now when I sell these lots, I will pay you after the lots are sold because they're going to be worth more now that you've put this in. So I will pay you back and keep the difference. Well, every time the guy tried to get payment, he was informed that no lots had yet been sold and there was no money. Desperate to get money from Kaminsky, because this guy was now out over $100,000 in work, he goes to Harry, who had a plan. Lusinger could take out a loan using his property as collateral. The loan would be financed by Kaminsky's other company, Auto Acceptance. Kaminsky would pay off the loan. Lusinger agreed to this and signed documents. He later found that his signature was on documents not only for his own property, but for property he did not even own. Lusinger also found that the loans were soon refinanced through two Chicago companies, Springer Investment and Mercantile Investment. So this is the first time this comes to light, is like 1959, 1960. And they're going to catch on that this is how he does things.
Okay.
Is he gets people on the hook Harry gets people on the hook to sign loan agreements. And the loans are not at great rates. And then on top of that, he puts their signatures on other documents that they themselves did not sign.
Okay. So now is he just doing that by, haphazardly sliding those documents into the documents that they think they're signing, so they're signing additional documents, or is it actually forgery?
It could be forgery. On some occasions, people are going to come forward and they're going to say that they were given blank documents, not like a blank sheet of paper, but a form that isn't filled out, and told to sign, and then Harry will fill it in afterwards. And in that moment, they're like, well, sure, okay, that's fine.
Fine, yeah.
But then the stuff he fills in is like, I don't even own that. like you're taking out loans based on stuff that I don't own. And then he resells them to a company. And I don't understand the whole reselling a loan thing. That's beyond me. I don't understand that. So anybody in the banking world who gets that, you'll understand that better. But by reselling them, he then profits and the loan gets passed on.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So this is just going on. We're finding out that he's doing this all over the place. There's a bar in Milwaukee called Henry's Show Lounge, which has a $15,000 loan out. There's just more things like that showing up. The excavator guy receives a note from an investment company in 1962 saying that he had signed a note a few months earlier using a Cadillac and a steam shovel as collateral. The excavator did not own the property list and did not recall signing the papers. He hadn't signed papers in years at that point. He called the Springer Company in Chicago, and the vice president informed him not to worry about it. The loan already had been paid off, so you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently Harry's taking out these loans on other people's names. He is actually paying these loans, but he's doing this with all kinds of people's property he doesn't have.
And was it just easy enough to do? Like, was there just a line of collateral and you could write whatever you wanted in there and didn't have to show that you actually owned a thing?
I don't know how loose this was, because it seems like he's doing this a lot. 1965, the FBI interviews someone, names redacted in the file, says that he knew Harry for maybe 18 years, had many loans with him over that time. He had noticed since 1960, Harry would use the same collateral on multiple loans. This jumped out at him but did not bother him. He knew the loans were refinanced for the place in Chicago and was okay with that. As far as the man knew, his name had never been forged. So this guy, like, they're doing some of these interviews and some people, like, they know something is wrong. This guy is like, I don't know that you can take out two different loans using the same collateral because you've already got, like, one piece of property or whatever tied up in it. But he's like, whatever, I got my loan. A man in Hubertus told the FBI that Harry forged his name on a note, and that a Chicago company said that he owed them $12,000. He had no idea why he would owe them $12,000. The FBI approached the U.S. Attorney James Brennan with what they were finding out on Kaminsky. Brennan said selling a forged note to an out-of-state company or selling a note with fabricated collateral could be an interstate stolen property charge because this is property he did not rightfully own, and he's sending it across state lines.
Makes sense.
Brennan said it also sounded like Kaminsky was doing what was called the double dip, where the same mortgage was resold to two different places so he could get twice the value of the original mortgage. Brennan said this would be hard to prove as a legal issue because the purchaser would have no way of knowing the mortgage was duplicated, and the transaction itself would be seen as legitimate. The FBI also presented evidence that people were signing mortgage notes for Kaminsky without being paid after he promised them he would never collect on the loan. He merely wanted the collateral to resell elsewhere. So if I understand the double dip thing, it sounds like he's sending an identical mortgage to two different places at the same time.
It to him.
Yeah. So one of those two is not going to be legit, but at that point he's already paid.
Mm-hmm.
The Milwaukee FBI office wrote to the FBI director about Kaminsky using some examples that they had found. One loan was given out in June 1960 for $10,000, and then in July 1964, 4 years later, the loan was somehow at $35,000. In 4 years, it had gained $25,000 in interest without going down, which... I don't know what the interest rate at the time was, but I don't think that's right.
That's pretty high.
Yeah. Harry would then sell the loan to his people in Chicago for more than it was originally worth. This was only possible if Kaminsky had somehow doubled the notes that he had originally, or the interest was so high that it couldn't possibly be paid off. And either way, the loan now exceeded the value of the collateral. Yeah, like if you're getting a $10,000 loan and using whatever as collateral, if it reaches the point where you owe $35,000, it's pretty clear that whatever you're using to get that loan is not worth that.
Yeah.
So if you end up in default or whatever, it's not going to be good. Another loan was made in June 1961 for $9,000, and by July 1962, only 13 months later, it was up to $23,000.
Wow.
It had gone up $14,000 in about a year. The agents found this was done in part by having the person sign two notes, and then Kaminsky filed them on two separate days so the Register of Deeds would not notice that it was the same loan. It's goofy.
I can't believe that he was able to do this. Like, man, this just goes to show how bad the security must have been back then. Maybe it still is this bad.
Yeah.
Because you should not be able to do this.
No. No. An FBI agent spoke with a woman in Milwaukee who had received many loans from Kaminsky in the past few years. She said, however, that despite taking out many loans, she only ever received $200 in cash. More often, Kaminsky would say that she had creditors and had her sign to pay those creditors. She would sign blank forms that he would fill out after, and she never saw what he wrote. After consulting her attorney, who told her to stop doing that, Kaminsky no longer told her that she had creditors. Her arrangement with Kaminsky was unusual. She owned a $70,000 building with a tavern and a residence, for which Kaminsky collected the rent. He used the money collected to pay the bills, but there never seemed to be any money left over after the bills were paid. On another occasion, she paid him $1,000 to get a building of hers painted, but he never showed her the bill. She once mentioned the loan to local authorities, and he then threatened to destroy her and foreclose on her properties, putting her out on the streets. He later said he would buy her property for $1, and then she'd be free of him, but she refused. Once in his office, he mimed the action of pulling a gun from his desk drawer while talking to her. I'm stumbling today. Yeah, one time in his office, he mimed the action of pulling a gun from his desk drawer while talking to her.
Wow.
Multiple times during the interview with the FBI, the woman broke down crying. So, So this guy here apparently keeps telling her that she owes more on the rent, has all these bills, doesn't let her actually see the bills, then makes her take out loans to pay the bills she doesn't know what they are.
And ironically, the bills are always exactly whatever she has in cash.
Yes.
So there is never a profit.
Yeah. FBI agent spoke to a bar owner who said he had an $11,000 loan from Kaminsky. It was odd to him because the items he listed as collateral were worth $6,000 at most, so he didn't know how he was even approved for more than that. He later found that items were added on to a blank form after he left Kaminsky's office, including 2 automobiles that he did not own. The man told Kaminsky, who said that it was probably just a typing error. When he filled out the paperwork, he did not work with Kaminsky directly, but with one of the other people in his office. So apparently other people in the office are doing the same thing. The woman said she originally took out $10,000 from Kaminsky for her tavern, and over the past few years took out more loans for attorney fees and hospital bills. She now owed $47,000, more than 4 times what she originally owed. She was paying $125 a month with an interest rate of 12%. I didn't do the math on that, but I'm guessing at that interest rate, 125 isn't going to get you very far.
No.
She realized that Kaminsky effectively owned all of her property, but hoped that someday that she could pay. I did do a little bit of math here. Even if there was no interest whatsoever, at the rate of $125 a month, it would take her 31 years to pay off what she owed.
And you said that the interest rate was 12%. Right?
Yeah.
So the 12%, if you can't do the quick math in your head, the interest, the amount she was paying, I don't even think would cover the interest.
Yeah.
Because I want 10% of $45,000 is $4,500, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, if the interest is 12%, she's paying $125. Again, I'm not going to try to do the math, but that sounds like at most she's paying off like $5 of principal a month. Like,
yeah, I don't. And if you do the math, I'm pretty sure that it's going to be $4,500 in interest a year.
Okay.
And that's 120 times 12 is not 4,500.
Yeah.
So it's not even going to cover the interest.
Yeah.
So
FBI spoke with the owner of Milo's Bar and Restaurant. He said that he'd been dealing with Kaminsky since 1948, so at this point, it's almost like 20 years, and always found their dealings to be friendly. At the present time, he owed around $65,000 on his property, which he estimated to be worth about $80,000. Milo acknowledged the interest rate he was charged was very high, but he said that was part of the business when no one else would give you a loan. I mean, yes, that's true, but that's why it's not legal. You're not supposed to be able to get a loan. If you get turned down for a loan, and then the only way you can get a loan is by going to somebody who charges you interest that you cannot possibly pay, that is not the solution.
No. Not the most sound financial advice ever.
A man who owned 2 restaurants said he was currently paying $500 a month to Kaminsky on a loan of $18,000. He was okay with that, but noticed the papers he received with the loan listed 2 cars and a variety of restaurant equipment that he did not own and wasn't even sure if they existed. So this goes on. They find this all over the more the FBI is going around talking to people that they're finding loans with. These notes will all be online if you want to get more examples, but it's a lot of the same thing over and over again.
Before you jump for any further, I want to make sure, see if we're on the same page without understanding. So what I'm understanding is he must be going to some other third party to get these loans. Kaminsky is not using his own money to finance. He's going to a third party company to get these loans.
Correct.
And that's where the whole fake... So somebody wants a $15,000 loan. They don't have the collateral to do it. He just uses some random thing to get the collateral that they need to get that loan, basically.
Yeah, so he's got this loan company, which is called Auto Acceptance. And I'm assuming it's called Auto Acceptance because he started out in the used car business. So this was probably a company he started to finance auto loans for people.
Okay.
I don't know that, but I'm assuming that's why it's called that. But either way, that's what it's called. So people go to him for loans, and maybe some of the smaller loans he's personally handling, but it seems like the majority of it he's sending to these two other companies in Chicago. One's called Walter Heller, and the other one's called AIC.
Okay.
And I'm not going to go into the details of that because the FBI talked to those other places, and as far as they could tell, they had no idea
that he was doing this shady stuff.
Yeah, they would get the paperwork, they'd process the loan, and as long as Harry continued to pay them whatever their arrangement was, they didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't sending people personally to Milwaukee from Chicago to be like, does he really have this car?
Mm-hmm.
They kind of assumed that the original loan company was doing that part.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, he's definitely running this all up through a much larger company.
And that's where these other items come in, because they need to see enough collateral. So he's just giving them collateral.
Yes.
Whether it really exists or not.
Right. Yeah. So he seems to write down cars a lot and other random things that just will get the paperwork to look right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the money comes through. So, and again, I don't know like a lot of the details of this because the FBI focus was on the fact that he's sending improper paperwork to out of state.
Mm-hmm.
So to them, the crime is that these are not correct. And he's getting paid basically by selling something that isn't his to sell.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that they necessarily care about the interest rate. Like, that's illegal too, but I don't think that's their focus at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm guessing that's the whole scheme, is that Harry is charging like 12% interest, whereas his Chicago guys, who are legit loan places, are probably charging him more like 4 or 5.
Right.
So he's keeping the difference each month.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a financial person if I've not made that clear at this point, but that's how I understand it. So, May 1966, the FBI spoke with a man that they had previously interviewed, who was friends with Harry Kaminsky. His name's blanked out, so I don't know who it is. He had since talked to Harry Kaminsky again, so he wanted to kind of follow up with the FBI. Kaminsky told him that he was concerned about what the FBI had asked him. Kaminsky specifically asked if the FBI knew about blank contracts he had people sign and which cars he was writing down to be used as collateral. He was curious if the FBI was fishing or had specific information, and the man said the FBI had copies of the contracts. If the man was being truthful to the FBI, it appears that Kaminsky knew what he had done wrong and how they were investigating him. The man told Kaminsky he was going to file for bankruptcy, and Kaminsky talked him out of it, agreeing to release him from any loan obligation immediately to avoid that. But anyway, so the point here is this guy who's both talking to the FBI and Harry Kaminsky, when he's talking to Harry Kaminsky, Harry asks them if they're asking about blank contracts and the collateral, which they are.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that Harry's asking if they're looking at that seems that he's very aware of where the weakness is here.
In his strategy that he's implementing.
Yeah. It seems like he knows that if they know that, he's in trouble.
Well, and when the whole way you tell this story, that seems very clear to me that he came up in the auto industry. He learned how the auto financing system works.
Yeah.
And he just figured this out. This is a way he can game that system, which is, I think, exactly what he's doing.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. June 1966, the U.S. attorney told the FBI an indictment was coming soon. He was considering calling in Kaminsky's staff before a grand jury, in part to feel out how they would work as witnesses. Whether or not they were helpful or not, just to see, are we going to be able to use them at trial? The same day, a civil suit was filed against Kaminsky by Milwaukee Acceptance Corp., not to be confused with Auto Acceptance Corp. It's another finance company. They alleged that Kaminsky had sold loans to them, but then proceeded to collect $100,000 on the loans after he had sold them. Kaminsky's attorney hoped to resolve the matter in negotiations. Kaminsky was more vocal, telling the press that he owned the loans in question, and then he would countersue them for $500,000, 5 times as much, to protect his property. So here what it is like, apparently he sold a loan off wholesale to this other company, allegedly.
But then just kept collecting the payments from the person.
Didn't bother to tell the person he sold it, so he just kept taking their money.
This guy's a real piece of work, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, but you may have found the lowest scum of Milwaukee right here.
Yeah. 1966 is when things really fall apart for him. By that fall, the Parkland Plaza shopping center in Muskego was foreclosed on, with $12,000 left unpaid. Kaminsky was one of the investors in that business. It was like a strip mall. It could hold 16 stores. That same month, he was a partial owner of the Chateau restaurant in Pewaukee, which went into receivership for owing $17,000. The restaurant manager there was allegedly owed $3,000. She sued Kaminsky immediately once this came to light for fraud, saying that she never even signed any legal papers making her liable. She was just the manager of the place. She didn't own anything. Kaminsky denied even owning any of Parkland or the Chateau. He says, I don't know why my names are on any of this, but the deeds filed were in his name. So it came down. Around this same time, the indictment comes down. I could not actually find the indictment, so I don't know exactly. He was charged with transporting forged mortgages in interstate commerce. So, like, no surprise there.
Mm-hmm.
He's filling out these mortgages and these loans, and he's selling them across state lines. Not a shock. Like, we know that's what he's doing. I don't know how many charges they got him with. So that's the part I'm a little fuzzy on. But either way, at this point, October 66, it's coming down on him.
Do you have numbers of, like, how much of this stuff did he have going on? Like, what kind of numbers, money value are we looking at?
I didn't add that up, but I will tell you, like, they interviewed dozens of people that they suspected things were going bad, and pretty much without an exception, they found problems. And those were the ones that they knew about. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were more that, like, weren't obvious cases.
And I mean, everyone that you've mentioned, I think the high's been 45,000 and the lows, like, they've all been like in the 16, 15,000 time. So I mean, for 1960, that's significant amounts of money.
Oh yeah. That great point. Yeah, between the 60s and today, like, adjusted for inflation, it's almost 10 times that.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that's a huge amount of money.
Yeah. So yeah, these are massive. This guy is multi-millions of dollars that he's cheating people out of. Yeah.
I mean, American Greed needs to jump on this guy's story and tell it. So,
I am honestly surprised he's not better known, because when this had to have been huge.
You would think so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, what do you suppose he does now that he's indicted? What would you do if you were indicted in this situation?
Well, I'm going to try and get into Harry Kaminsky's mind, and I'm going to guess he just keeps doing it because he probably doesn't know what else to do.
Okay, that's a fair guess. That is apparently not what he's going to do.
Does he just kill himself?
He doesn't do that either.
Okay.
Doesn't do that either. That's a fair guess as well. No, he does what I think is probably the smartest business move. He files for bankruptcy.
Okay, and which is a good idea, I guess.
Like, that doesn't get him off the hook for the criminal stuff, but it's going to get him, hopefully, out of a lot of this debt stuff he's going to find himself in. So he files for bankruptcy. He is actually declared bankrupt. The courts agree, and they find that now that he's getting foreclosed on with all this stuff, they're like, okay, looks good. Which this leads to him having to sell things off, his ownership in various properties, including his own home, which was a large home on Lake Michigan in Fox Point, which, if you're listening to this, I assume you know Milwaukee, but if you don't, Fox Point is a really nice neighborhood north of Milwaukee. His property along the lake was sitting on 3 acres of land, which is pretty decent for lakeside property. He actually had to sell it off under value just to kind of liquidate things. This is a situation that his wife would protest for years and years. Because this whole I don't know how aware she is of his scams. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't know any of it. But definitely now that the bankruptcy part's going on, she's not thrilled that suddenly like all their property is disappearing and for like half of what it's worth.
Mm.
February, so it's a few months later, February 1967, Kaminsky's found delinquent on a $58,000 loan on Papa Joe's restaurant in Brookfield, another company that he has his name on signed on to. This news came as a surprise to Joe Sorcy, who operated the restaurant. He had been paying a mortgage to Kaminsky since 1964 and believed that he had paid it off and that he was the owner of record. He didn't even realize that Kaminsky was still on the paperwork. March 1967, after Kaminsky failed to pay $44,000 of a $66,000 loan, a judge ordered the sale of 19 lots in the River Hills subdivision of Pewaukee that he had. That same month, the IRS filed a lien against him on unpaid taxes, and this is massive. $113,000 in unpaid taxes from the IRS, which again, adjusted for inflation, this is like $1 million in unpaid taxes. So everything's coming down on this guy now.
He's done.
Yeah.
I mean, he is done.
May 67 is his criminal case is slowly working its way through the court. Federal court's very slow. Kaminsky files a motion to suppress any information gathered on him through the use of electronic surveillance. This is sort of just a delay tactic. This comes out, as we've been talking about on this podcast the last few times, after the revelation that Frank Balistrieri and Dominic Frinzi had been bugged. Now it's like a thing where everyone's like, well, let's see if I can get them to come out with their bugs.
Mm-hmm.
Internal FBI discussion noted that this was absurd. He had never been the target of a bug. He had never even accidentally been picked up on another bug. So, it's a good defense strategy, but it's clearly just trying to delay things. By March 1968, to try to reimburse creditors, every last piece of Kaminsky's property is auctioned off. Anything, even stock in his own company, Auto Acceptance, which I don't know if you want to own part of Auto Acceptance, but they sell off his partial ownership in that. And then, before anything ever gets to trial for his criminal case, Harry dies October 1968 at age 59.
Natural causes?
Natural causes.
Okay.
The bankruptcy issues continued for some time, but the criminal cases, as I say, vanished. It was likely a very tangled web of paperwork. In addition to whatever businesses that Harry owned, his wife Charlotte was also partial owner of some of them. And she also partially owned a woman's garment company called Adam's Rib that had previously been owned by her father. So she had partial ownership of that. So this whole thing, trying to work through the bankruptcy and whatever else they owe, was probably a huge mess. And now Harry's not even around to deal with it. So his widow, I'm sorry, is stuck with this.
Gets stuck with dealing with all the illegal things your husband did. That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just kind of breezing it because we don't need to mention every single loan he did. But the point is once he caught on to how to do this, he apparently just kept doing it. And
at the beginning of the podcast, you talked about how it was weird how he invested in so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a theory. Now, listeners, this is a theory.
Okay.
But I would guess that he was doing that because he wanted... I wonder if somehow in the underwriting process of doing these loans, they would let's just say I use restaurant equipment as collateral.
Mm-hmm.
they want to know that I actually own a restaurant, and that's proof enough to them that I own this restaurant equipment. So by having paperwork that shows his name on all these different businesses, I wonder if he's just grabbing them and using the things he knows those businesses would have as collateral to get these loans.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I hate to say it, clever.
Yeah.
Illegal as hell, clever.
I don't know exactly. My suspicion is like where he's buying up real estate, he probably owns that outright. That I would suspect. But I do wonder if he gets his name on a number of these businesses through the loan sharking thing, because that's kind of like, it's not really obvious to me that that's what he's doing, but that is kind of what a loan shark does. Is if you can't pay, you hand over part of your business.
That could be too. He's using that rather than breaking your wrist or whatever.
Right. So like you might be like, hey, you own this restaurant, you owe me such and such dollars. We can knock your loan down if you make me like a quarter owner or something.
And then he has a whole bunch of equipment that he can take out as collateral against.
Yeah. So, like I say, it's like the if somebody wants to go through this, I strongly encourage it, because there's a lot of shady stuff going on here, and I bet you it's super, super fascinating, but it's down in the weeds.
Yeah.
Because there's so much of this is financial paperwork, and he's like, by what he's doing, he's trying to muddle it, and some of it is really obvious what he's doing, but some of it, by the multiple layers he's going through, it's not as obvious what he's doing, because by the time it gets to the people in Chicago, they don't realize anything is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They're giving out a loan, they're getting paid. So once they get it, like, they're involved in this scheme, but they don't even realize that it's a scheme because their loan looks clean.
Right. And I almost wonder if I would love to see somebody that has a strong financial background go through this stuff just to see, because I would love to know if what Harry Kaminisky was doing, if he was getting away with it because the systems were so bad back then that they were easy to cheat, or
I think
was he just brilliant and just knew how to game the system? Because once you know how a system works...
He's definitely a smart guy. I mean, that's for sure. But I think that a part of this... I don't want to sell him short, because I do think he's a very, very smart guy. But I do think it's got to be some flaws in the system. Yeah. I know, for one thing, didn't really go into this, but the FBI, when they're going through this, the FBI is going super, super thoroughly. The FBI, for people who don't know, traditionally, they're not like cops.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI is traditionally like lawyers and accountants.
And investigators.
Right.
More so. Like.
Yeah, they're very like office-oriented people. Like, that's their background. So when they're looking at it, the accounting FBI agents, like, they understand this. And they're looking at it, and they're actually double-checking. They're seeing this, and they go to the state DMV, and they're looking up these automobiles. And numerous times, they looked at the VIN that was written down on the loan paperwork, and the VIN did not exist in the state system. And
really?
Yeah.
So he's just using fictitious cars.
Right.
Wow.
Like, it's that fake. And my thought is, maybe in the 50s and 60s, that was easy to do because there wasn't like a big central computer
database that they could ping and see.
Yeah. So when you sell it to the guys in Chicago, like, a guy in Chicago sitting at a desk isn't going to go to Madison and be like, can I look up the DMV records? They're not going to put in that much work. But whereas today, I imagine if you fill out loan paperwork on a car
with a fake VIN, it's just going to get
denied. It's going to immediately pop up like, I think you typed it in wrong. It didn't come up. I do think that he's benefiting a lot just from the fact that
it's primitive systems, basically.
Yeah. Everything at this point is going to be on paper, so it would just be that much more work for somebody to verify it. And if they're getting paid, they're not going to bother to verify it.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's probably a huge part of it. But man, now, does this guy have, we probably talked about this in the last episodes, Eddie, what was this connection with the mafia?
So that's actually a really great question, considering what this podcast is. It's fuzzy. Like, he is not a mafia guy, strictly speaking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he is not paying a percentage to the mob. I include him on the podcast just because he's a Milwaukee guy, and this is like a massive scheme. So that's why he's on here. That's a great question. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that he is. There is an interesting amount of overlap. You know, it's coincidence, but it's overlap. Like one guy who he's defrauding actually is like Carlo DiMaggio, and DiMaggio is the owner of the La Tosca Cafe. His son Sam is a major mafia burglar. So there's definitely an overlap. It seems like a lot of the mob guys and mob-connected guys go through Harry for their loan needs.
Which makes sense because he's probably kind of the shady loan guy.
Right.
If you can't get a loan from anybody else, you go to Harry. So it seems to make sense that mafia members would probably utilize his services.
So he's not a mafia guy in the sense where he's paying anything to the mob. I don't have any record of him, you know, hanging out, having drinks with Frank Balestri. So no, I thank you for that because yes, he is not a member of the mafia, but as a major Milwaukee loan shark, he's running in these circles. You know, he presents himself as a legitimate businessman, but he's definitely the people who know, like, who you have to go to when you want to do financial things you shouldn't be doing. They know that Harry's the guy. He is a facilitator, we'll say.
Yeah, and I'm surprised the Mafia never went in there and tried to get a paw on the stuff he was doing because from the sounds of it, he was moving some serious cash.
Yeah.
And even if the Mafia could have taken 1% of that, it would have been a huge thing.
No, completely. I am also shocked by that. And maybe there's something that I just don't know because there's always things that aren't going to come. Like, the FBI wasn't investigating him for mob connections. They were investigating for financial crimes. So there could have been a whole other side of him that I don't know. But I don't have that evidence.
Yeah. So for all we know, he could have been the Mafia accountant.
He could have been. I don't believe so because I feel like that would have come up in passing at some point, and I don't know that, so I don't believe so. But he comes up enough, and even though he's now dead at the end of this episode, he's actually going to come up once more on this podcast. Like, so he finds his way to pop up in like mafia adjacent stories.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, that is Harry Kaminsky, and unfortunately, Harry Kaminsky's dead. But you said he's going to come up again, which we'll have
He'll
to wait.
He'll come up once more.
We'll have to see why that is in a future episode. But,
but yeah, if people want to see more, check out the website because I really was skimming here. Like, you don't need to hear the same thing.
So, your notes have 10x the cases that he might, or loans that he might have been dishing out.
Yeah.
So if somebody's really interested in seeing what
There's
kind of
more
money
to that, and even my notes are scaled down from the FBI files. So I'll see if I put the FBI files on. I generally do put them online. So I'll see if they're up. So people always can check out the sources as well.
Perfect. All right. So then with that, we can wrap this episode up. We will be back next week with a Patreon episode, and in 2 weeks with a regular Mafia episode.
Yeah, we're both a little stumbly today.
Yeah. So, Gavin, where can people reach out to you with questions, comments, concerns?
They can reach out at milwaukeemafia@gmail.com. I try to be good about it. I know I'm not always great about responding. I got an email a couple days ago that it took me 3-4 days to get to. I'm sorry. I don't check my email every day. But that is the best way to reach me. I did have somebody message me over Facebook. I do not prefer that.
But you're never going to stop them from
I'll probably still respond, but I really don't prefer that. And let me soapbox this for a second. If you email me, I can check email at my convenience, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you Facebook me, the problem is it's going to pop up. It's going to tell me I have a Facebook note. And this is the thing. Like, this is like a job. Like, if I'm doing 9 to 5, and I'm not doing 9 to 5, but if I'm doing 9 to 5, I feel like checking my emails. I check my emails. When I leave at 5, I don't want to deal with it anymore. So if I go home, it's like 7:30 at night, and I get a pop-up on my phone saying, hey, you got a Facebook message. I don't want to see that because I'm not in work mode anymore. So, I'll still respond to it, but it's nice to have some controls over when people are going to.
And not to mention the fact that if anybody out there has never used a Facebook page, which is what you're contacting Gavin through, it pops up once and then it disappears and it gets buried. So it's very possible if it's not
well organized.
Yeah, if it's not convenient for Gavin to answer at that very second, there is a good chance that it is going to get buried until the next person sends you a message, and you might go back and see it at that point in time. But I'm sure you're not jumping into your Facebook page and looking at the messages every day.
It's the way that Facebook has it set up for business or author pages or whatever. It's not super easy to navigate around.
Yeah.
So,
and email is just 100% better.
Email is better. It might take me 3-4 days to check it because I don't check it every day, but I'll check it. And I'll get back to you.
And it'll probably be twice as fast as opposed to if you send it through Facebook. So,
yeah.
So with that, enough about the Facebook thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to complain. I just wanted to explain to people, like, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to be on call 24 hours a day. So,
and we do have a Patreon that you can check out, patreon.com/Milwaukee Mafia. You can also go over to MilwaukeeMafia.com and check it out there. So with that, we'll wrap this episode up and we'll be back for the next one when we're back. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Milwaukee Mafia podcast. Join us next time for another look back at Wisconsin Mafia and true crime history.